Hey there everyone, welcome back to the Dan Cave and welcome to another video build. So this time we're turning Italian and building the Revell 24th scale Ferrari California. So Ferrari California 2008-ish from Ferrari, kind of an entry-level baby Ferrari. However, I was lucky a few years ago to drive one at one of those supercar track day experience things, and you know, entry level, fair enough. But for me, I don't own any Ferrari, so the chance to drive anything with the prancing horse was very much enjoyable. Still has 400 odd horsepower. So when I came across this kit, the Revell kit itself is close to 15 years old. 2009 originally released. So I found one on eBay. Picked it up from eBay. When it arrived, kit was in perfect condition. Box was a bit tatty, but it was in good condition. But however, it had a Hobby Design detail upset in there, so some photo etch from Hobby Design as well was in the box, which was a nice little surprise for a cheap kit from eBay. So however, this is the video build of it, and let's not hang around too long. So first of all, if you're new here, please subscribe. If you like the video, please drop it a like, and of course feel free to leave a comment as well in the comment boxy thing down below. So yeah, so let's head on over and catch up with the build, which is on screen behind me, but you'll want to see it in full detail, no doubt. So one part covering a full build. Let's dive on in. I'll come back at the end for my final thoughts. Over we go. It is the usual end opening box where we start. Revell's end opening boxes are annoying. It's the one thing, well, one of the things that annoys me about them. But some of their kits are good. It doesn't stop me buying them. But however, let's get back to the building. So usual starting place, starting with which bits of the bodywork need to be painted. Anything that needs to be body color, we're getting out of the getting off the sprues first, cleaning up any of the seam lines. There are a few prominent seams on the body, a couple of awkward ones in around the headlights, a little bit harder to get to. And then there's some nice seams along where the roof gutters, roof rails, roof gutters kind of sit. So it is kind of usual process, get them all cleaned up, get the body sanded back, nice and smooth, and then over to the spray booth to start the priming process. So priming this time is with UMP pink primer. Over the red plastic, it'll provide a nice base for the subsequent actual base color. So approximately 3 coats of, well, it's not approximately, it is 3 coats of UMP pink primer, all shot through UMP Apex airbrush at about 30 psi. So they lay down very nice. Now the pink color sprays on quite light, but it does darken up as it cures. It's much darker than the Mr. Surfacer pink. If it's too dark, obviously you can add some of the UMP white primer to lighten it up a bit. So once the primer's had 24 hours to dry, it's time to go back and basically look for any flaws. Those flaws can be flatted back and then reprimed as necessary. So once all the priming is complete, it's back into the spray booth, this time with some Gravity Spain Rosso Corsa shot through the hard-earned Steenbeck Infinity with the 0.4 needle. So as this is a lacquer paint, it is going over an acrylic, which is absolutely fine. Just go careful with your coats, build up nice light coats of paint, and just keep on working those coats until you get the nice deep Rosso Corsa red. Essentially for me, I don't know how many coats I'm going to put down at the start. I keep on laying down coats of paint until essentially I see no color shift from each subsequent coat. So as you can see, I also like to make sure I get in under the arches into all the awkward little angles. and then sequentially work my way around the body, normally starting on the sides, well, basically under the sills, round up the sides, each end of the car, and then bonnet and roof as necessary. Although the separate bonnet, I'll paint that in a separate step. Although obviously all in the same session. As you can see, that paint is laying down very, very nicely. And I reckon I've used probably at least 3 to 4 coats. Sometimes it can be 5 or 6 coats. As I said, it's basically about looking at how deep coloured red you get. Are any of the subsequent layers actually showing any cover shift? Is there any areas that are missing any paints? So there's not really many decals to go on this. There's a few metal badges, they'll go on afterwards. So basically at this stage, it's time to add a panel line wash into any of the kind of door panels, body panels, anywhere that that basically can take a wash. I'm going to put a black ammo MIG wash using a liner brush. So once the wash is on and any excess cleaned up, it's time to move on to the clear coat. So once again, it's Gravity Spain's 2K system, mixed 3 to 1 to 1. First coat is tack coat, very light coat. You don't want a full gloss finish at this stage. This layer is just all about setting up a good adhesive layer for the subsequent coats. So stick it in a box for 10 to 15 minutes, back in with your second coat, and this time it's the first gloss coat. You want a nice gloss finish. You can tolerate a little bit of orange peel at this stage, but really it's all about coming back in with your third and final gloss coat, and this is where you want that perfectly clear gloss finish. And as you can see, that 2K is laying down absolutely perfectly. A couple of dust spots here and there, but that's almost inevitable. So as said in the intro, there was a hobby design detail up. Our photo etch set came with this kit that will be used at various stages. But as part of the part prep and trying to get all the parts cleaned up, so all these chrome parts are all going to have their chrome removed using just some simple household bleach. And after a few minutes, you can see all that chrome is beginning to come off. So as with any kit, and particularly with Revell kits, there is quite prominent seam lines around a lot of the parts. They all get cleaned up, any sprue attachment points are cleaned up, and then it's over to the spray booth once again, this time to start on the priming stage. So most of the parts will be primed in UMP black. I think the colour call out for the underside of the car is for dark grey, but it's not really going to be seen, so it just goes in UMP black. So that's the first priming session. With that set aside to cure, it's time to start work on assembly of the engine. There's a few parts that can be assembled at this stage. The main engine block itself, rear diff, actually I think that's the gearbox for the rear, and the drive shaft. So all those parts can then be transferred to the spray booth for, once again, you guessed it, a UMP black primer. So a couple of coats of black primer goes down. All these parts are going to be painted in metallic colours. Now, if you want a really top quality metallic finish, UMP gloss black is great. But as these are mainly going to be hidden away engine parts and exhaust and underbody parts, the UMP black primer is fine. And then I go over that with, I think it's Alclad aluminium, and then possibly steel on the hubs. So basically a variety of Alclad metallics. And then once those parts have cured, they can be easily assembled into the chassis. And to make sure I get a good strong bond, I'm using Tamiya Extra Thin mixed 50-50 with EMA Plastic-Weld. And as you can see at this stage, the front hubs and steering are in, and a big chunk of the exhaust. But once again, it's back to the spray booth, this time focusing on the engine. So the engine gets painted in, so I think that's Alclad aluminium. And then the same on the gearbox and drive shaft. a prop shaft actually. So drive shafts are left in black primer. Trust me, so many of these parts will be completely invisible. So the wheels are being done in SM204. So one of the super metallic series from Mr. Hobby. So I'll get 2 or 3 coats of that. Now the intake manifold for the engine, that was primed in UMP white, and that's getting a coat of, well, a couple of coats of Revell 34, which I think is Italian red. So that's an acrylic paint. They are quite thick in the pot, but they thin brilliantly with UMP thinners. So here's the first of the photo etch parts being used. So this time it's the radiator cover. Radiator is left in UMP black, and the photo etch goes straight on. So most of the engine parts have been detail painted now. So you can start adding the rocker covers. So they're going to be attached using some CA glue. As you can see, they just pop in place. Once they're done, the engine itself can be added to the chassis. The radiator with its photo etch cover on it can be added in place at the front as well. Then prop shaft, gearbox and drive shafts can be added for the rear. And then the rear inner arches can also be added. Now, I'm using Tamiya Extra Thin with EMA Plasti Weld because I want a really strong bond between the plastic, because I know the body's going to be a tight fit over those wheel arches. So if my hand would get out of the way, you can see some of the parts for the intake manifold are being sprayed in X18 semi-gloss black. So 2 or 3 coats of semi-gloss black, that'll cover up the red from the previous step. And then there is some photo etch Jubilee clips to be added to the hoses. Now, there's a lovely photo etch grill, but it is an absolute nightmare to get it to assemble. Just using a hammer just to flatten it out a little bit. And then each of the individual rails gets added with a little bit of CA glue. Hopefully I've got them reasonably straight. This is very, very fiddly work to get this to line up completely correctly. And once all those parts are in place, there is then, of course, a Ferrari logo, which gets added in the middle with a little drop of CA glue on the back. So the outer surround of the grille is actually the kit original part that will mount it into the body at a later step. Now, intake manifold has had some PE parts as well, so Ferrari logos, a couple of central metallic parts as well. So interior parts, so they were to the body or interior cabin parts, so they were primed in UMP grey, and then I'm using Ferrari leather beige for the interior. Back of the seats are getting a nice contrast color using, I think it's Revell anthracite. It's a nice off black color, so very, very dark gray. They're not going to be highly visible in the car anyway, so just brush painting is absolutely fine. So for the bottom of the interior tub, there's going to be some flocking added. So I'm using an Humbrol clear matte enamel varnish, and then using some Pro Scale flocking, using their sandy beige coloured flocking for the bottom. Now on the dash itself, I'm using the same anthracite colours I used on the back of the seats. This time, however, I've masked it up just to give it that nice smooth finish, because that will be quite a visible part underneath the windscreen. So with a little bit of detail painting, the addition of some decals, the dash itself is looking good. There's some photo etch speaker covers to go in. So they go on the rear of the door cards. So a little bit of CA glue just pops them in place. And of course, the addition of a dark brown wash onto the seats and the door cards just adds a nice little bit of contrast and depth for that interior. So some more photo etch parts. This time is the brake discs. Using a file to remove any of the sprue attachment points for a photo etch. And with the discs themselves that were painted up earlier on, the photo etch discs can just be added in place. I've gone with yellow for the brake calipers. So they pop nicely in place. And then with the wheels that were also painted earlier, the brake discs are essentially sandwiched between the wheels. Bit of an odd way to assemble them. That's the way the kit calls them out though. So the disc pops in place. Back of the wheel pops onto the inside of the tyre. And then you pop the front side of the wheel into the tyre, and that encloses the brake disc as well. So you just repeat that 4 times and you end up with all 4 wheels ready to go on the car. Now, with all those parts set aside, it's time to move on to sorting out the 2K, which has been left to cure for a couple of weeks, so it's nice and hard. But there is a few dust spots, so I'm using God hand sponges. Normally use 6, 8, and 10. Any bad dust spots, I might use 4. I have 4000 grit. And once I'm happy with the flatting back, it's time to do some polishing. So I've decided to rotary polish this time because nice flat surfaces, not many edges. I've done this before on the Subaru Legacy build. I was pleased with the results. So this time I've gone for some different polishing heads, but nonetheless, it's the same process. Plenty of polishing compound. You can use a little bit of water with some soap as well to act as a lubricant. And I basically just control the speed of that USB drill with my finger. A very low torque motor. You need hardly any pressure on it to get it to stop rotating. So you're just letting the polishing pad do all the work. So after the first step, using the UMP compound, I'm reasonably happy. Basically repeat that all over the body. Obviously being careful of any edges, any high spots on panel corners, etc., because you don't want to burn through the paint. But nonetheless, let that polish work in, remove any of the scratches from the flatting process using the God hand sponges. And that lovely shine from the Gravity Rosso Corsa with 2K is coming back again. So once you're finished with the first stage, make sure you clean off any residue. Then it's time to move on to the actual polishing compound. So again, using another head, which is a softer head. Same process, plenty of compound down. Work it into the surface. Low RPM, low torque motor. And no burn through on the 2K or through to the colour. And then once I'm happy, just using basically a glass cleaning cloth just to wipe off any residue. And then repeat that step around all the body of the car. So obviously you can go near the edges, but it's prolonged exposure to any kind of abrasive. It's very easy to burn through on the edges because that's where the 2K in the paint will be at its thinnest. Once I'm happy with all that, clean up the body and then try and clean out any polish residue out of any of the panel lines. So one of the easiest ways to do that is to get it over to the spray booth and use an airbrush basically as a jet wash. Use some water and a very soft toothbrush. So it's now into the final run. It's time to start assembling all these parts. The dashboard slots in basically into the body. Then the interior tub gets slotted in. So all these will be attached using some CA glue. So you just need to make sure you get the alignment right. Make sure everything looks in place. which it does, and then use some CA glue at the attachment points. And then it's a case of trying to get this body over the chassis. Now, the main issue is the wheel arches. It's a bit of a squeeze. And I basically sit there for 10 to 15 minutes just trying to figure out what's the best way to get these wheel arches past the inner arches or the arch linings. So once it's popped in place, kind of needs a little bit of CA glue along the edge of the chassis itself just to get that to stick to the body, and so it sits in nice and firm. And with that done, it's time to start adding parts like the front grille. As you can see, I've also added the Ferrari badge on the front. So that came from the Hobby Design photo etch set. Most of these parts will now be attached with PVA glue. In this case, it is glue and glaze from Deluxe Materials. As you can see, that front grille just pops in place just like that. Now, the glass in this kit, so it was masked up and sprayed for the black surrounds. The glass itself, glasswork, it seems to have taken a bit of a battering over the years. It's got quite a few scratches on it, so it's not perfect. But it will absolutely do. Of course, once that's all in, make sure you clean up any fingerprints. This time using some Novus plastic polish. And as you can see, the kit is now finished, and these are the final photos. So I'm really pleased with how this came out. I think it's a nice kit from Revell. Shape looks good, the lines look good. Maybe not as crisp as some offerings from other manufacturers, but a lovely kit for a bargain found on eBay. And with the addition of that PE from Hobby Design, it really sets it off. So let's head on back to me for my final thoughts. So there we go. That's the California built, looking very nice in its Rosso Corsa colour. So my original plan was this was going to be a different colour. I was actually going to do the colour of the car that I drove, which was a metallic blue, California something or other. Rosso California. No, not Rosso, because Rosso's red. In fact, I think I have paint. No, I thought I had the paint. I do have the paint somewhere, but it's not where I thought it was. No, paint's not there. So yeah, so the metallic blue, that was the original plan. That so surprisingly, from Gravity Spain, the metallic flakes were actually way too big. So that plan was ditched. I still had some Rosso Corsa from a previous Ferrari and thought, well, it's Ferrari, it's got to be red. So that was the choice I went with. So we've got a red California. So I enjoyed the build. Level of detail is pretty good in the kit. Usual issues with Revell, you know, some parts lack a little bit of definition. Some of their kind of fitting sequences can be a bit clunky. I've never liked how they do wheel attachments. They're always very random. You know, unlike Tamiya, which got a very, you know, kind of clear poly caps, and just the way the wheels mount is pretty much consistent across all the Tamiya kits. Revell seem to have a different way to mount their wheels in every single kit. Some of them work, some of them don't. On this kit, actually it did work reasonably well, if a little bit unusual, kind of sandwiching the brake discs between two halves of a wheel. Obviously it gives a better sense of, you know, the brake disc being closer to the outer edge of the wheel. You sometimes lose that if you kind of mount them right on the inside. They can get lost inside the wheel itself a little bit. But however, minor little issues like that aside, the kit went together well. Tight fit on the body over the chassis, but once it's on, it does fit quite well. The Hobby Design detail up kit, there's a lot of parts in it which didn't really make sense or add value. The things I did use, so the brake discs, the badges, the front grille, all do add to the kit and do make it look a little bit better in my view. Some of the parts I didn't use, I didn't think were going to add anything to it, and so I just left them. I didn't use them. So the instructions as well from Hobby Design were pretty vague and didn't really help. So some of the parts just, it wasn't clear what they were intended for. So they were just left to one side. But aside from that, the build went together well. I enjoyed it. And we got a finished product. And we got another video built. So plenty of reasons to celebrate and be happy about it, which I am. So there we go. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to pop a like down below, and feel free to leave a comment in the comments field. I don't know what that was. That's a typey symbol, hand gesture. As I said, don't let my weird typey hand gesture put you off subscribing, by the way. Please subscribe. Please like, and feel free to leave a comment. Thanks for watching. Thanks for bearing with me. Yeah, that's it. Roll on to the next video. See you later.